Welcome to Practical Church Planning. My name is Brian Brammer, and with me is Dylan Dotson. And today we are talking about 6 ways to avoid ministry burnout.
And this episode is brought to you by missionsupport.com. Mission Support knows that you want to be effective in ministry. Like most pastors, you probably feel like you never have enough time, energy, or expertise to get everything done. So Mission Support comes alongside pastors like you as a guide to provide the expertise to do the things you don't know how to do and give you back the time you desperately need. So whether it's bookkeeping, SEO, websites, capital campaign, they also help with sermon graphics and all these various things. You can talk to a guy today at missionsupport.com. Just check out the services they offer, see if you could use some help, and you can go from scattered to feeling focused on your mission. It's possible to love being a pastor again. And of course, as we always say, when you go to missionsupport.com, check out the different services they offer. If you end up going with a service, make sure you tell them you heard about them from Practical Church Planning, and you will get 10% off, which is a great deal.
Yes, it is.
So missionsupport.com, don't miss out. Practical Church Planning, get 10% off on any of the various things that might be weighing you down. Now, today we're going to talk about 6 ways to avoid ministry burnout. Mm-hmm. So how to be healthy for the long haul. It's really easy to be focused on the here and now and not, making it over the long haul. Especially, the stuff I get to do with Acts 29 and helping assess church planters. It's like we get so focused on I got to do all this stuff and I'm quote unquote busy all the time and all these sort of things. But if we don't realize well, it's great that you got stuff to do for the next 6 months, but what about the next 60 years or 20 years? And so going a little bit slower so that you can make it for longer. Here are some things I found helpful, and we'll share them with you in this episode. Number 1, give yourself clear end times on sermon prep. So this is if you preach regularly. Even if you don't preach regularly, you actually might spend too much time on it because you always feel I got to keep working on it. So this is primarily, at least from my experience, for sermon prep, but this also can be applied to anything that you're doing that never is quote unquote done. So when you write a sermon, you could always be tweaking it. Mm-hmm. So if there's any kind of bigger tasks that you have and you could always be working on it, how do you not make it consume all of your time? I've talked in various episodes about my sermon prep process, so we're not going to get into all of that there. But part of, I think, what makes it helpful for me is that I have very clearly defined times of when I'm working on it and when I'm not. And when I'm not when I'm hit my time, I'm just done.
You're done.
And so this is most important for me on the day that I'm sermon studying, not just reviewing, but actually studying. I have a lot of time. So for me, it's Wednesdays from 8 to noon. I'm studying and writing a future sermon. Of course, there's more to it than that, but the bulk of the studying and writing happens that day. And what happens is by noon, I'm done. So whatever I have, now there are exceptions occasionally. It's not like I can't keep working on it. Now that might sound unspiritual, but what happens over time is that here's the time I have allotted to it. So I'm not going to be checking email. I'm not going to check social media. I'm not going to do all these other things. I have to be done by 12. So I'm actually going to be focused. Oftentimes I'm done before then because I've actually focused and written. And so that's for me. I've got, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, I'm typically going over this, the sermon I'm preaching this Sunday. Thursday at 10, I'm done. And then I might look over it Saturday night, Sunday morning, but I'm not working on it then. And I would just commend to you that if you always feel like you're not done with it because you're always working on it, you need to have specific times of here's when I work on it and here's when I don't, so that you're not always doing an extra thing. Oftentimes the extra time you spend on it isn't actually making it that much better anyway. And so again, if you're preaching regularly, this could be a helpful one because a lot of stress and wasted time, in my opinion, can be done on sermon prep because we're prepping and then we're taking a break and then we're doing this thing and then we're coming back to it. Focus specifically, give yourself clear end times, and then when you're done, just move on.
Yeah, I don't preach regularly, but I have before. So what take Dylan's advice, don't take the other advice of do it a little bit here, a little bit there, throughout the week, and then start panicking and getting anxious that, wow, I left this out, I left that out, because, if you do, especially with sermon prep or any time when you're trying to memorize or produce some type of, a sermon is a monologue. So anytime that you're preparing something like that, doing it in those short little bursts because you're just trying to find time is not going to work. So what Dylan's approach does, I think it really is, it takes discipline, which it's hard for us or anybody to practice discipline, even making your bed or something like that. But no, if you give yourself that a certain amount of time, you're going to get so much done.
Well, it makes me think of, I think it's James Clear book, Atomic Habits, highly recommend. And he talks about, we kind of view people that get a lot done, or there might be certain people in your life that do a lot of things or whatever, and we view them as disciplined. And what he talks about in his book is, yes, it takes discipline to get started, but really it's habits. Because once you form the habit, it's no longer, I've got to do this. It's this is just what I do. And so, and then again, this could be if you're writing some sort of curriculum. It could be any various things, but here's the time. And also, Brian Androsian, the previous Brian before you. When we've talked about sermon prep in the past, he also made a good point. When you don't preach regularly, you might, have more time. You might start on the sermon sooner because, you don't have to preach every week or whatever. And so you could always be like going back to it. And so even if you preach once a month, once a quarter or whatever, I would still recommend here are the times I work on it and here are the times I don't, so that you're not always like going back to it. And so give yourself clear start and end times when you're working on something that's never done, particularly like sermon prep. I think over time, once you get in the habit of doing this, you'll actually finish sooner because you're not taking all these breaks. And it's just like you're also, one of the things that I really enjoy about this process of like, here's when I work on it, here's when I don't, is that I've got to the point now where I just like trust the process, which sounds very, I don't know, what athletes say or something. I don't know. But it's like I have a process that I trust. So like I know, hey, if I'm not, it doesn't have to be finished at this point because I'm going to review it a couple times. And as always, this is why I'm a fan of getting ahead at least by a week of sermon prep, is because you're not like, I've got to get this done right now, because you've got some time. So for me, it's helpful when I do my Wednesday sermon study and prep for a future sermon. I'm not starting from scratch, having to be done in like 3 days. I can give myself some time with it too, which is helpful as well. But number one, to avoid ministry burnout, give yourself clear end times on sermon prep, because that's the big thing that people can get stressed on. Number two, take email off your phone and check it less. Now, I know most people don't do what I do, but I'm never going to give up because it has been so helpful to me. I don't have email on my phone. I'm an inbox zero guy. Talk about other episodes. Regardless, I know people are different. But I always like to say when it comes to email that email is an invited distraction. It's like someone continuing to knock on the door of your office or your house to talk to you. And so what happens is like, it feels very productive. So if we're doing something, we're like, oh, I don't want to break it. So we check email. Well, when you check email more, you write more emails, you get more emails, you spend more time on more emails. And so I would recommend, just personally, you don't have to do it this way, take it off your phone altogether, because emergencies never happen over email. If somebody needs you, they'll get you. And even if that's not your MO, if you don't want to do that for whatever reasons, that's fine. At least checking it less, because again, part of the reason why I took it off my phone, however long ago it was because our phones are addictive, and like we just like out of habit, we just like click buttons and open up apps, even if we don't need to. And so email is one of those things that's like you check it a lot, you just read it, but then every time you're in your inbox, you're thinking about stuff, even if it was like a quick thing. Maybe someone emailed you and they're like upset about something. Like we've all had those times this email we check at night, and now we're just like the rest of our night's ruined because now we got to deal with this thing. Whereas if you didn't check it, you didn't know. So I would recommend taking it off your phone. I will just say this: everyone's like, no. Every single right now I'm batting 1,000. 100% of people that have actually taken off their phone have all told me that was a great idea. So you can still check it because you have a web browser. You can go to gmail.com and sign in. But even that friction point, reduces the habit of I'm just going to check my email all the time.
So yeah, Dylan has emphasized this to me. I hadn't listened yet, but
that's okay.
So I guess if tagging on to the whole, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago when we talked about allow your staff to have kind of their own side gig or stuff. So I check my email often because I'm looking for quotes from manufacturers or my other freelance stuff where I'm kind of managing some video content creators, and that stuff kind of goes on throughout the day. So it may not be possible for you never to check your email, but I would say there are definitely like check it less, but maybe even take off the notifications could help to where it's like you have a set determined time. I'm going to check my email this time, not every time you hear that notification, because Dylan says he's a zero inbox guy. I am as well, but I'm also like a zero app notification guy where if there is like one or two, I will just, and it's bad, I'll go onto the app and just like click something that I've read it just so that notification goes away. And that's not always good. Right. So there is a fine balance, depends upon, whatever else you're doing. But in Dylan's context, where it's a full-time job, you have to shut off. You have to. I struggle with that a little bit because I don't like going someplace and being surprised by the emails. So like when I give blood, I watch them, and it's because I don't like that anticipation. I want to know what's going on all the time. And so when I get into the office or when I, start working, I want to know what I'm getting myself into. Now that's probably a me thing, and that's something that I have to learn, but I'm going to take the challenge. It's going to be difficult. Dylan's not saying this is easy. He's just saying it's highly encouraging.
Speaking of Brian, who was on staff outside of this, he was the same way. And I've slowly got him to convert.
Okay.
Here's my thing.
All right.
So I agree. You don't. Again, part of it does have to do with your job. So if you've got a lot of admin stuff in your role, if you've got some side jobs, you got to check it. Obviously, part of this is that. I think my recommendation is if you don't take it off your phone, I get that most people are like, I can't do that. you should absolutely turn off the notifications. Like, there's no reason to have email notifications. I actually turn off all notifications on my phone for everything because you can't help but check it. And so you know you're going to check it anyway, so you don't need it. But I would say, yeah, maybe set specific times if email's like a struggle for you. Like, I'm going to check it at these times. I as well like to know what's going on. I also just know that when I check my inbox, I can get easily distracted on things and not focus. So for me, I don't check it in the morning until it depends on the day, but stuff that I'm doing. But whatever. My personal challenge: take it off your phone. You don't have to, but at least check it less. But my guess is if you want to check it less than you're currently checking it now, you've got to do something different. So whether it's taking off your phone or whether it's turning off notifications or whether my recommendation, at least starting out, is checking email on your calendar and only check it during those times. Still check it every day, a couple times a day. You'll still need what you need. Again, it's different if you've got some administrative stuff, but I'll just check it less than you do now, and I think you will be less stressed out. Because again, when it comes to time wasting, email, in my experience, is one of those big ones. We're just checking all the time because it feels very productive. Yeah. So Cal Newport in his book, Deep Work, he also wrote a book called World Without Email, which is really, really good. He just talks about how all this asynchronous communication that we thought would make us more productive is actually makes us less productive. So anyway, take it off your phone, or at the very least, check it less often. It will help you. Number 3, have clearly defined ministry boundaries. So this is another thing, again, in the type of work that we do, you always could be doing it. Like there's, it's like writing a sermon or whatever. It's like there's someone I could talk to or emails, or there's always like stuff you could be doing. And so what happens is, especially if you're like a pastor or you meet with people, you do a lot of people work or that sort of thing. If your calendar is open, it's really easy to say yes. And so what the challenge is, you need to be proactive about what you're going to say yes and no to, so that even if your calendar is open, it doesn't mean you're actually available. So this isn't new on this podcast, but I'll just reiterate. Like, I recommend determining how many ministry nights a week you're going to work. Now, this will change based on if you're married, single, if you have kids, the age of your kids, all that sort of thing. For Christine and I, right now, it's twice a week, and we lead a community group. So when our community groups are meeting, that counts as one. Mm-hmm. So only once other week will we do something ministry related, which means sometimes we have to wait a few weeks, which people are fine with doing. I think a lot of times we feel like people want to meet right away. Even if they do, it's just like the long-term longevity of our marriage, of our kids. We want our kids to know that we care for them, that they're more important than the church and all that sort of thing. So I would recommend 2 things. I always say, one is how many ministry nights. There are exceptions, yes, but they need to be exceptions. Is that, and that way, even if you're free on next Wednesday, if you've already got 2 things planned, that means you're not free. And the second thing is determining when you're going to be done for the day, which again, this can be flexible, and there can be exceptions. But for me, again, Christine and I, like, she knows, like, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, my end time is the same. Now, they're actually different each day, but it's like set. And I'll text her if something comes up. It can happen, but there's no like, when's Dylan going to be home, or when are we doing this thing? Like, it's very clear. So I would be proactive about when I'm going to be, how many nights a week I'm not going to be doing ministry stuff, and when I'm going to be done for the day. And again, going back to the first one, if you have clearly defined boundaries and end times, you're much more likely to focus for the time that you have, knowing that you need to be off when you're done.
Yeah, and I know that to be true because I've sent him like what I thought was a funny meme in the evening, and he didn't respond or laugh. So I'm like, man, I'm left out to dry, and then he laughs in the morning or something like that.
My phone was probably off.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Yep. So that's something I need to do more of as well. So along with having clearly defined ministry boundaries, as I'm actually kind of new here at New City, I've been on staff a while ago at different churches as a lay leader or paid staff. I also lead a small community group on Thursdays, and so I'm probably not working here at the church or doing ministry stuff Thursday afternoon. I'm trying to do that in the morning so that I can get that break because it demands a lot of people. We have a small group, but we've got 16 people. I don't know how that happened. It's a great group, but that takes a lot of energy. I'm an introvert, so I need that decompression, that time of decompression. And so if you're not fresh, if you're not taking care of yourself by setting these boundaries, you're not going to be able to be there for those people who really need you at the right moments.
Yeah, I think that's helpful too. There's positive and negative of every job. Ministry, you're not going to get paid a lot. There's a lot of, it can be difficult. It can be great. But one of the things, generally speaking, it probably depends on your context and I don't know what your church culture is, but generally speaking, your work schedule can be a little bit more flexible. And so I would encourage you to take advantage of that, like, here's when I'm going to work, here's when I'm going to rest, here's when I'm going to take time off. You still want to get all your stuff done, but I think that's a great example of like, hey, we've got a group, especially if you're more introverted, it's a big thing, it's a big commitment. Like, I just remember when we started New City, I felt like I had to work the typical 9 to 5 because that's what you have to do. And then there could be extra stuff at night and whatever. And it's like, well, you got to move your schedule around a little bit. Again, especially depending on if you're married, if you have kids, all that sort of stuff too. And so part of that is, hey, here's part of my schedule on this time at these days. I typically take a little time off because I got this thing happening at night. So that's helpful as well. So just having clearly defined ministry boundaries will help you avoid burnout, because just because your calendar is open, it doesn't mean you should be doing something. And knowing what to say yes and no to proactively makes it easier to say no when people ask for stuff. So number 4, I just rather have a robust spiritual life. I don't know the best way to word it, so that just sounded nice. I just, man, like, we're 6 years in, and a lot of times my health in terms of like leadership and caring for others and following Jesus is directly correlated to how my personal spiritual practices were going. And last year I read a book. It was Burning in My Bones. It was the biography of Eugene Peterson. And it was, oh man, it was just so good. But it was just like fascinating to me. A lot of us know who he is. He's written a lot of things and a lot of stuff. But it was just like, man, his spiritual practices were disciplined or habitual. They were regular. And it really, like, his internal life matches external life. And it was really a challenge for me to, like, this needs to be, like, an important thing. And I sometimes would struggle, too. It's like, well, in ministry, like, we got to do our quiet time stuff, too. But, like, people that work in the normal world, they don't get to do it during the workday. They have to do it outside. And I would say yes, but also take advantage of the fact that you can do that. And I just, like, the encouragement is, would I want the people I'm leading to have similar spiritual practices as me? I think that's a great question. And hopefully the answer to that is yes. Now, again, people can do different things, like does sermon prep count? Ray Ortland, I wasn't there, but somebody was somewhere and they were hearing, someone asked Ray Ortland this question. He's an older pastor guy, he's respected anyway. They're like, does sermon prep count as quiet time or whatever? And the guy who was telling me the story was like, oh, I knew. He was like, here's what he's going to say, whatever. And he just responded by saying, everyone should work out their own salvation with fear and trembling, which is like, it's not a yes or no. It's like, you got to decide.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And their seasons are different. My personal experience with it is I found it's better when it's separate. And so consistent daily times of prayer, times of fasting, times of devotional Bible reading, and not just like for sermon knowledge. They're just different. And so I would encourage you to have regular, consistent rhythms. I think one thing that can help is that if you do it with other people, maybe you have someone hold you accountable, maybe you're in a group of guys or girls or whatever, and you talk about spiritual disciplines, but you'll always be better, and you will, if you do that. And part of, I think, the burnout in ministry is like, we have so much going on. This is one of the first things to go because it's not like effective or efficient or doesn't get anything done. And then we're not even as close to Jesus, let alone we have all these other issues. And so having a robust spiritual life, which I think would be defined as consistent practices that you are engaged in, daily for the most part. Doesn't have to be every day, but you know what I'm talking about. They need to be consistent. You will do much better when they are, and you will not do as well when they're not.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that other than it does depend on, like Dylan had said, sometimes your sermon prep could be a time where you are just like, wow, this I'm so glad I've studied this book of the Bible. I'm sharing it. There's been times I've prepared different series and it's like, wow, this is becoming a chore, so I need to do something separate. But there's other times it's been like, wow, this has been at a perfect time where I needed this. So don't be afraid to, lack of a better term, merge, but that should not be you should create a time where it's not. Being intentional in your prep and being intentional in your personal devotion and your personal growth with the Lord. But those two can overlap, and if they do, awesome. But don't plan on it, I would say.
Yeah, again, there's no hard and fast rule. This is what it has to look like. I can only say what I found helpful, and maybe in a year it will be different. What I found helpful is consistent daily practices. I've even, like, for me, for a time, like, I would like review my sermon, Sunday morning, and I wouldn't do much of like a Bible reading prayer time. And I actually on Sunday morning, which again, you don't have to, but like I found it's unhelpful for me if I do like review on Sunday morning, like at home. So I do like my typical thing I do every other day on Sunday mornings, even though I'm going to church, community. Like, I just found it to be really helpful. I used to, like, on Wednesdays is when I do my sermon writing. Like, I wouldn't necessarily do like personal devotional stuff because I would do the writing stuff. And a lot of times the sermon writing is great and it is devotional. But I just found like if I wasn't consistent with it, if I took a Wednesday off or took a Sunday off, then it just became a thing where it wasn't habitual enough for me. And so Wednesday mornings, I still do my own personal, typical, prayer, Bible reading, some scripture memorization, all that sort of stuff, before I start my quote unquote work day. And so I'm not saying you need to do that, but it needs to be like robust. And I would define robust by consistent. And so if it's, I'm not going to say what it needs to look like or how often you need to do it, but if you want to avoid ministry burnout, it needs to be robust and consistent and not the first thing that goes when you have a lot of stuff going on, would be my recommendation. So that's number 4. Number 5, consistent sleep patterns, which again, it's like everyone tells me this. All I can tell you is from personal experience, I've gotten better at this the last couple of years, and it's made a big difference. It's really been fascinating to be. A couple of books I've been reading recently had nothing to do with sleep, but they mentioned like how people used to sleep even 100 years ago, like way longer than we do now. And part of that was the invention of like the clock and the wristwatch. I mean, people always had time, but like it was like it's so ingrained in us. And then of course the light bulb and electricity. And so like we're just tired because we stay up late, we get up early. It's really artificial when we do that, which is there's obviously tons of benefits of technology, but there are some drawbacks. And so I'm not someone who sleeps great anyway. And so I've just in the last couple of years just been really super consistent about when I go to bed and when I get up. And it's different like on the weekend, that's fine. But like, again, it doesn't really matter what it is. I would just, it was just a challenge to me because I think that people say the ideal is like 8 hours or at least being in your bed for 8 hours. And I think a lot of people today was like, that's a long time, 8 or 9 hours. But it's like people used to sleep 9 or 10 hours and they got way more done than we did. It's not because, here's my argument.
Okay.
We sleep less, not because we have too much to do, but because we're on our phones. Like if you look at your screen time, you're on your phone 3 hours a day. Like if you had no show to watch or, TikTok to scroll or like you read or play a board game or go to bed. Now, again, I'm not against those things, relaxing, but I just found myself, it's like, the reason I'm staying up later is not because I'm doing necessarily anything productive, and the things I'm doing aren't even like necessarily life-giving to me. Yeah. And so, which is part of the reason why, like, I turn off my phone before I go to bed, and now I read for about 30 minutes before I go to bed, But again, you don't have to do those things. I would just say it needs to be consistent, and if it's inconsistent, you're gonna have problems. This may not be a new one, but again, these are just things that I've noticed a difference over the last couple of years, and being less tired has been really helpful.
I would say for me, recently I had really kind of gotten off my phone. I tried it for like a week. Got off my phone around 9 and got ready for bed. Didn't go to bed because it takes me a while. I can't go to bed right away. I can't fall asleep right away.
Yep.
But starting, it's really my sister does this because she wakes up at 4:30 in the morning. She's crazy. She loves rock climbing, all that kind of stuff. So more power to her. No thanks. But what really has been helpful is starting that preparation for bedtime. Not only does it kind of, I don't say wear you out, but like mentally, your body starts to shut down. And so when you do fall asleep, it's quicker. But just kind of starting that process to where if you're on your phone at 9 o'clock, you're actually kind of still revving your brain up, and it never has time to fall asleep, to kind of slow down. If you're one of those that wakes up at 10 o'clock in the morning, because of your job, that's fine if you stay up late, So what we're emphasizing is consistent sleep patterns. Now, if you're in ministry, you may not want to be staying up that late all the time because you're not going to be good for anybody. But I could use 10 hours of sleep. I could sleep for 10 hours. Where other people they can operate for 6. So however it is for you, establish that pattern and try to stick to it. Easier said than done. Life happens, but
all right, I'm going to do this really quickly because you talked about getting ready for bed.
Okay.
So this is part of what helped me is I actually have a bedtime routine that I do right after dinner. If we don't have people over, if we're not doing something, my routine is after dinner is done, we clean up. I immediately change into what I'm going to sleep in, which I used to like not do that because I'm like clothes are clothes. I don't really care what they feel like. But that's done. I floss right away because who likes to floss? I don't like to floss, but I do it right then. Pick up my clothes for the next day, and I make my lunch for the next day. And that way, when I wake up in the morning, or when I need to go to bed, like I'm not thinking about these things. I'm not dragging my feet. I'm like literally, I brush my teeth, I read and go to bed. Like I don't have to do these things. So that's really helpful. If there are certain things you find like dreading, it's like do them earlier in the evening, and you don't have to. The second thing with the phone was I used to just put it away or not try to touch it. But if it's on, like it's just easy. I'm just going to check this thing real quick, and then you're on something. So like for me, it's different for different people. But like right now on weeknights, I turn my phone off by 9:15 every night, and I turn it off. Now people are like, "What if somebody calls you?" Cal Newport, I think it's in a book, World Without Email. He just talks about how like if you plan 99.9% of your life around the 0.1% chance, that's just not a wise thing. In the 6 years of New City, no one's ever called me in the middle of the night with an emergency that I could have done anything about. Which I'm not to say it might not happen. And my wife has her phone, so they could call her. But it's just like the fact that I turn it off means I'm not even going to check it for anything. And it might be inconvenient, but it's like it makes it easier. So consistent sleep patterns is not just I need to go to bed on time or earlier, but what are you going to do proactively to make going to bed earlier? I think that's the better thing than just trying to make yourself going to bed earlier. If you can get some of these things that you dread done sooner, or the distractions out of the way, it makes going to sleep easier.
You could just imagine you laying there and just like,
Yeah.
please go to sleep. Like that's not what we mean.
Well, I
You
had
can't
somebody-
will yourself to
right.
go to
But
sleep.
it was funny. It's like, this is just how it's our, and I get the question, but because of how our culture is today, someone recently was like, so you turn your phone off, but then what do you do? they're like in their mid-20s, like, what do you do? And it's just like, it's funny. It's like, well,
That's
I could read, I could talk to my wife, there's other stuff you can do without your phone. But again, if your phone's on, it's easy to get distracted. And again, I'm not against your phone at all. I just found like checking social media, like it did nothing for me. I was like, I just feel like I wasted 15 minutes doing what? Like it wasn't helpful. And so anyway, I check social media, just not at night. So there you go. Have a consistent sleep patterns would be really helpful. And then last but not least, number 6, going with what we just talked about, time away from your phone every day. This is a personal recommendation for me. So I try to do this in 2 ways. Again, it's different seasons. I get that. From 5 to 7 on weekdays. So like Friday, Saturday, it's a little bit different. But on weekdays, Sunday through Thursday, I don't turn my phone off, but like I put it away. And that way it's like, if I'm, making dinner, hanging out with the kids, like there's just not this like, oh, I'm sitting, it's so easy to be habitually take out your phone and get distracted. And, you read all these things about kids talking about how much their parents are on their phones nowadays and like how bad it is for them. Even though, I would say I'm not on my phone all the time. What I don't want is even the impression that that's happening. Now, of course, I'm on my phone around them. But if I'm consistently between 5 and 7, we're doing all this stuff before bed or whatever, I'm not like checking my phone here and there. Hopefully they're not getting this impression that dad's always on his phone. And so I would try to find some time away, not just like I'm going to try not to touch it, but either like you put it somewhere else or you just straight up turn it off. Now, again, seasons of life, if you got kids that are driving in high school, obviously maybe you're not going to turn your phone off. I get it. Like if maybe you couldn't do the night thing. I get it. But just generally speaking, what would it look like to not just, hey, I'm going to try not to look at it, but either straight up turn it off or physically put it somewhere else and go for like at least an hour of not looking at it, I think would just do good for your soul. So,
And if you think you spend a lot of time on your phone, but you're not sure, your app or your phone tracks that.
Yep.
So honestly, look at your screen time and just kind of assess it from there. If it's more than it should be, then you maybe should try some of these things just to help yourself out. I know for me, when I have forgotten my phone, because I forget things often or where I put it, it's like, yeah, I might feel like my pocket might feel naked or something like that. But when I reflect back on that for like an hour or 2 hours, I'm like, I felt like really relaxed.
Yeah.
Like I didn't feel like I had to check on something or like the world was going on without me because honestly, like who cares if something happened or some new dance, I don't even, whatever's going on nowadays. You think you're there is that fear of missing out, but you're not at all. And it's an objective truth. You're not missing out. So I would encourage you to kind of look at how much time you spend on your phone. I think even it tells you like peak times that you do so, and then and maybe do some analyzing.
Yeah, it tells you apps too. One practical thing that could be helpful is just you can set time limits, like you only can be on 15 minutes or social media or whatever, 15 or 30 minutes a day, or your email, 0 minutes. No, but you can set time limits, and then of course your phone will tell you like you've hit your limit, and you could say okay and keep using it. But at least it's like, hey, there was this mental block that I said I was going to commit to. And again, some of this can be helpful to have someone in your life that you talk through with these things. If you're just doing it yourself, I'm going to try to commit to this is not helpful. So like my 5 to 7 and my 9:15 turn off, I'll have people that know about this, and like when I meet with them, they ask me about it. And so like there's some accountability there, not just like aspirational. And so part of this, to become a quote unquote disciplined person, you have to create habits, and having community help you create those habits is helpful. So another thing that you could do, they have like these habit trackers. I first got this from James Clear, Atomic Habits, but you can like go online and just like print out. It's like a grid, or you can make your own grid. It's like each day of the month, like 1 through 30, and then you can make a check. Did you do it? So there's times where I'm like, when I tried to get in the habit of flossing every day, it was like, at the end of the day when I went to bed, I would check certain things. So flossing was one of them. Did I floss today? Did I write a note today? You could say, did I turn off my phone at this time today? Yes or no? Did I put my phone away from 5 to 7? Like there are like, as you track it over a course of a month or two, you at the end of the day, like I really want to be able to just give it a check mark. So there's simple things like that you can do as well to help motivate you and encourage you. But I would, if you just try to do it by yourself without telling anybody, it could be really hard. But time away from your phone is more possible if people know what you're trying to do. So maybe share that with some people. So those are 6 ways to avoid ministry burnout. It's something we all want to do. Nobody wants to be burnt out, but we have to be proactive in some of these things to make it not happen. It won't just not happen because we don't want it to happen.
Yeah, right.
Some of these things might not be fun, but they'll be worth it. At the end of the day, what I think the main thing, Wally, is sometimes you just need to go slower so that you can go further. And that's what we want to do. So hopefully this was helpful for you. Again, missionsupport.com. They can help you with some of this burnout stuff, some of the stuff that's stressing you out. Get it off your plate. Check out with them. If you're on Facebook, you can check out the Practical Church Planting Facebook group. And if you want more access, just some really highly practical like trainings and tips, and I do a monthly, Zoom training, ministry training. You can check out the Practical Church Academy. You can send me questions about your ministry context. So the links for that will be in the show notes, or practicalplanting.com. You can check out the Practical Church Academy there. And we'll be with you next week on Practical Church Planting.
See ya.